Hello there friends and welcome. Today we have at last my Summoner and Necromancer guide for Baldur's Gate 3. It actually surprised me how much support there is in this game for the Summoner playstyle, right? You can have an absolutely massive army of summon creatures following you around, and the best part is, unlike most other RPGs, you won't really be restricted by annoying summon limits or short duration summons. You can have everything you want in Baldur's Gate 3, definitely higher than 30. There is really a lot of variety here. For a true menagerie of summons, we have a Raven Familiar, Flying Ghouls, Mephits, an Intellect Devourer, man's best friend as our trusted dog companion, Skeleton Snipers, Dryads, powerful elementals, even a genie, Treants, and of course our trusty Mushroom Zombie army. All in one neat little package. You have summons for melee, ranged attacks, spells that can be spammed on every round, and sniping too. And all footage you see here is on Tactician Mode 2, just to show that your summons will be capable no matter the difficulty mode. So without further ado, let us get into our Summoner and Necromancer guide for BG3, first with how the main mechanics behind summoning work in the game. You can have as many summons as you want per party member, so long as they come from different spells and abilities. For example, my water elemental Myrmidons here come from an upcast version of the level 5 Conjure elemental spell. When you cast it as a level 6 spell, you can choose between the Myrmidons or the normal level 5 elementals. If I were to now go for a normal elemental, let's say as a level 5 version of the spell, let's choose Earth Elemental here. Notice that my Water Myrmidon got replaced by the Earth Elemental because it's coming from the same spell. Even if it's upcast, it's still the same spell. However, because there are so many different summoning spells and abilities in the game, you can still accumulate quite a lot of them. Now, the only exception to this rule that I've seen so far are the Fungal Zombies, which come from the Circle of Mushroom Druid subclass ability called Fungal Infestation. You can have as many as you want per character, well, limited by 4 because you only have 4 charges per long rest anyways. But it's why I have 4 here, despite it being the same ability. Also, some summon spells will become stronger at higher levels, as I've just covered with the elementals. Another great example is Animate Dead. At level 3, the normal, you only summon a single zombie or skeleton, meanwhile at level 4, you can get triple that per cast. And when you have many characters that can do it, well, it certainly adds up. And speaking about the undead summons, do note that they will not heal. All of the other summons, even if you take a short rest, because they last longer than that, they'll be healed too, together with other healing spells and abilities. Sadly, it doesn't seem like you can heal the undead ones, which is a bit strange because coming from other D&D games, undead are meant to be healed by negative energy, right? But I don't think we have any abilities to do that in Baldur's Gate 3. Although the ghoul variants at least do have a Devour ability to heal themselves, but that's situational. The best thing about some of the more powerful summons is that they have infinite spell-like abilities. For example, the Dryads can cast both Spike Growth and also Entangle at will. Last but not least, amusingly enough, when walking with your summon army in very crowded areas like the 2 cities at Chapter 3, including Baldur's Gate itself, NPCs will start shouting and running away from you, while the guards will follow you around. There's really no consequence to this, as far as I was able to find. I mean, you won't get attacked on sight or lose quests or anything. It's just a matter of NPCs moving around, which can be a bit annoying at times, but it doesn't lock you out of any content. Well, now that we know how the main summon mechanics of the game work, let's get into what all of the summon abilities are, including the best ones, of course. And I'll go level by level, as I think that's easier to understand. The very first one are the Familiars from the Find Familiar spell. It's cast by default as a ritual spell, which is great because it does not cost a spell slot at all so long as you use it outside of battle, and will replenish on a short rest. While you get to choose between 6 different animals, I'll be direct, the best one is without a doubt the Raven, right? For multiple reasons. First, it can actually fly, And this is going to be the same logic for the other summons I'll cover. Usually the summons that can fly are by far the best of them all, because they have complete control of their movement. And flight in this game is super good. You can, well, ignore both choke points and also elevations together with targeting enemies that are way above you, for example, or down below. It even allows for some hit and run tactics because of how easy it is to run away from enemies when you're flying. But the best part about the Raven is its ability called Rend Vision, which lets you blind enemies. This doesn't require a saving throw at all, it only has a roll to hit. So long as it hits the enemy, they will be blinded 100% of the time. And blind is, well, one of the best debuffs, because it forces the enemies to both have disadvantage on their attack rolls, while also making all of your characters, including all of your summon army, have the opposite, advantage on their attacks against the blind target. Also, because blinded enemies don't have attacks of opportunity, you can easily use the Raven for hit and run tactics, because for most of the game it will be quite frail with just 1 hit points, but later I'll cover ways of increasing it even further. Mine, for example, has 33 at end game. And like I said before, you can just resummon it out of combat anyways, as a ritual spell. Unlike, let's say, Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, there is no debuff or consequence to the main caster if their familiar dies, just resummon them again, it's that simple. The second best early summon is without a doubt the Imp familiar from the Warlock Pact of the Chain subclass. You can get the Imp as early as level 3. Just like the Raven, it can fly together with higher hit points, but the best part is it is fully resistant to physical damage against non-magical weapons. What this means is, unless the enemy has an enchanted weapon, the Imp will take half, that's 50% damage, from all physical attacks, including ranged. That's piercing, bludgeoning, and slashing. And trust me, the vast majority of enemies in the game do not have magical weapons, even late game, amusingly enough. So the Imp can provide both a source of, let's say, tanking, when your party is at their weakest early, together with great maneuverability from flying, and it can also deal quite decent damage too, because it can sting enemies for extra poison damage if they fail the saving throw. Overall, it's definitely a good summon to have, and why I like having a lot of Warlocks early game, because you can have around 3 to 4 Imp summons, 1 for each Warlock. Now, because the Imp also counts as a familiar, you cannot have, let's say, both a Raven and an Imp at the same time, at least not from the same character. And of course, we can't forget about everyone's best friend, Scratch, the trusty dog companion, which you can recruit at Act 1. When you do so, your main character will get a level 1 spell called Find Familiar Scratch. It works just like the Find Familiar spell, right? It's a ritual, replenish on short rest, and well, we'll summon the dog for you. But anyways, what Scratch excels at is not actually in combat per se, but rather its utility. First, it will help you find items while traveling through the world with him. Second, unlike all of the other summons, it has the Help ability just like your party members, which can revive downed allies. Of course, you can use him to bite enemies too for damage, but it's not particularly good damage, and early on he'll have very little hit points, just like the normal familiars. Don't be afraid if he dies though, because you can just summon him again. It's not permanent. Your best friend Scratch will always remain at your side. For our second best early summon, besides the Imps, we have the Cleric exclusive Spiritual Weapon. Now first, the limitation this has, as opposed to all the other summons I'll cover here, is that it has a limited duration, right? It's 10 turns, so essentially will last for the whole battle, but you'll have to cast it again on subsequent battles. The summon itself, however, is quite good and definitely worth the level 2 slot. You can choose the weapon type it will become. I usually just go with great swords. And here's the best part, this is quite tanky for the early game, just like the Imps, because it's fully resistant to all physical damage. That's 50% taken from all sources, magical and non-enchanted, Hell, it's even 50% from almost everything else, including elemental damage, even force. Because you can cast this right on top of enemies, and they usually go for the closest target, even on Tactician, at least they love going for my spiritual weapon, especially if your other characters are far away, it can hold its ground and absorb hits your characters would have taken otherwise. It is also cast by default as a bonus action, right? Which means you can still attack and cast another spell with your cleric on the same round you do it. And after that you'll always get to attack with the weapon itself without spending a cleric action. The third summons we can get are the classic Undead, the skeletons and zombies from the Animate Dead spell. When you first get them, you can only have but a single zombie or skeleton per character. However, if you are a Necromancer wizard starting from level 6, through the additional Undead ability, this will summon one extra skeleton or zombie per cast. Meanwhile, at level 4 it will become 3 or 4 for Necromancers, and at level 5, when upcasting, you can choose between one Ghoul or one Flying Ghoul, or up to 3 Ghouls even as a level 6 spell. Now let's get into what each of the Undead summons do. And I'll be blunt as always, early on when you're still limited to the skeletons and zombies, the skeletons are by far the best. And the reason is simple, they have the range advantage, something the zombies lack. First, their damage is quite decent, 5 to 19, because they also deal an extra 1d10 necrotic damage per bow strike. And most enemies in the game are not immune to necrotic damage at all, including quite a lot of undead even. 5 to 19 for a ranged summon strike is pretty good when you consider how many skellies you can have, right? At level 7, for example, is 3 per character, or 4 if Necromancer. And this can help when it comes to initiative, right? Because the zombies will lag way behind your other characters. Usually they only get to act after all of the enemies. Meanwhile, the skeletons are at the top initiative, meaning they can surprise enemies. Lastly, while the zombies' melee strikes have a very nice ability called Crawling Gnaw, which always works on the enemies and makes them be automatically reanimated as a newborn zombie upon death, there's a much better way of getting it instead of the Animate Dead spell. The mushroom zombies, of course, which I'll soon cover because you can combine them with the Animate Dead ones, meanwhile you have to choose between skeletons or zombies, as the Fungal Zombie comes from a different ability. Now, as I mentioned before, at level 5, you'll get to summon Ghouls or Flying Ghouls. The Flying Ghouls are of course much better, because like I said before, flying is amazing. They deal quite decent damage, 6 to 21, with higher 2-hit chance than the lesser skeletons and zombies. Plus, all of their melee hits have a chance of paralyzing the enemy based on a constitution saving throw. Paralyze is probably the strongest debuff of them all because, unlike everything else, it does mean you'll have 100% chance of hitting the enemies on, let's say, melee attacks. Plus, as if that was not enough, all of your hits will automatically be critical hits against the target. And this isn't just for the Ghoul, right? It's for everyone else on your party, including other summons. The Ghouls also have the unique Devour ability to heal them. The only issue with this is it's quite limited because the enemy has to be either prone, knocked out, or sleeping. If they are paralyzed, it won't work, sadly. What you can do with other characters is go to your passives, then toggle non-lethal attacks on. This way when you kill the enemy, they'll be knocked down instead. At which point you can devour them with your Ghoul to restore their hit points. As I said before, undeads cannot heal by default. The main issue with the Ghouls is, because they come as a level 5 Animate Dead variant of the spell, you kinda have to choose between them or the skeletons. To me, at level 5, if you're going with a Necromancer, then you might consider using them as a level 5 spell instead of the skeletons, because you get 2 Ghouls at once. Otherwise, because they have to compete with triple skeletons at level 5, I'd much rather the skellies, but it's up to you. As a level 6 variant though, because it's triple Ghouls, at this point is when they become really way better than the skellies, especially if you're a Necromancer. For the next summon, we have another Undead. This time, the Fungal Zombies. They are unique to the Circle of the Spores Druid archetype only, from the Fungal Infestation ability which you get at level 6. You have 4 casts of it per character, which is why I also said not to bother with the Animate Dead zombies, just get the Fungal Zombies instead, because you can combine them with the Skellies. Just like the zombies, they have the Undead Fortitude ability, which means whenever they get killed, they'll revive with 1 hit points, but it only works once. They are also fully resistant to all physical damage, enchanted and non-enchanted, so can be somewhat tanky despite their awful armor class. As I said, zombies have very low dexterity too. Its attacks do decent enough damage, but not as much as the skeleton, and well, will inflict Crawling Gnaw to create more zombies for you, just like the usual Animate Dead zombie. Now, the newborn zombies you get from this ability work in a different way because you can't directly control them, unlike all other summons, it's up to the AI. Second, they are constantly taking damage on every turn, so they'll die very fast, which means you can't really have all of your newborn zombies walking around with you. They'll die after the battle ends, most likely. Fungal zombies, though, are permanent. They are also easier to get than the normal Animate Dead zombie because your Fungal Infestation ability works on both beasts and humanoid corpses. So you can, for example, turn, amusingly enough, a chicken or even a rat into Fungal Zombies for you. After all, what Necromancer doesn't like? Efficiency, right? Waste not, want not. Now that we've covered the level 3 Undead spells, let's get into level 4 ones, and, well, this is when summons get really powerful. First, most casters besides clerics and warlocks, so both wizards and druids, will have access to the Conjure minor elemental spell at this level. You can then choose between 1 Aether, 2 Ice Mephits, or 2 Mud Mephits. And the Mud Mephits are definitely the best pick here. First, they can fly, but their most powerful ability is called Mud Breath. With this, you can breathe mud as a cone on enemies. It can hit quite a lot of targets at once, and the best part is it does not have friendly fire at all, so only hits enemies. It also leaves a mud puddle on the ground, always, which will reduce the enemy's movement. But the best part is, if they fail a dexterity saving throw, they'll get hit with the Muddy debuff. Muddy is just like blind, so all of your characters will now have advantage on their attacks against the Muddy enemy, while they'll have disadvantage on their own hits. Now, while the DC is not that high, 12, remember that you can have multiple of these Mephits breathing at the enemies, right? Because it's 2 per character. And most enemies in the game, including even on Tactician Mode, don't have high dexterity saving throws. Usually it's the ranged foes that have it. But you can have so many Mephits mudding the enemy that eventually chances are they'll roll low and fail the save anyways. The Mephits damage is quite decent as well, 4 to 19. Bludgeoning, which is great for targets that are vulnerable to it, like skeletons. And they also have a special Mud Fling attack. It deals very low damage, 2 to 5 only, but well, at the very least it's ranged. Last but not least, the Mephits can also be used as walking bombs of sorts, that's right. They have the Death Burst ability. Whenever they die, they will explode, dealing 4 to 24 damage to surrounding targets, including allies, so be careful. Together with applying the Muddy debuff to enemies, just like their Mud Breath. And because you can also choose to sacrifice them and use this ability on demand, of course they'll die, you can create some nasty explosion chains with your Mud Mephits, right? Because if a lot of them are together, they'll explode and then the other ones will also explode and so on. It can be fun but dangerous if your allies are nearby. Also, for some reason, the Mud Mephits, if you rest with them, they'll explode on top of your characters when they get up from resting, reducing their hit points, which is a bit annoying. So be sure to dismiss them first before resting, right? So that doesn't happen. Now there's still another amazing level 4 summon spell, and this one is Druid exclusive, Conjure Woodland Bean. When you first cast it, you'll summon a Dryad. The Dryad by herself is quite good. She can use both Entangle and also the Spike Growth spells at will, which are great. And she even has a passive called Nature's Step, which is a toggleable feature that makes all surrounding allies immune to difficult terrain, including to her own Entangle. Amusingly enough, the Dryad is quite competent at melee too, because she can also cast the Strength Shield spell as a bonus action, which highly increases her damage to 7 to 35, that's right. Your simple Dryad can hit for up to 35 melee damage. That's better than many Great Sword characters, right? Even if she only gets one attack. She even comes with 2 good berries for healing. The Dryad also has the unique magic resistance ability, which means she has advantage on saving throws against enemy spells. Quite good too. Last but not least, here's the best part. The Dryad herself can summon another creature to your party. Through the Fallen Lover ability, you'll get to summon a Woodland, which kinda looks like a Treant. This 3 guy is quite tanky at 80 AC, higher than most summons. It even has a shield, which is somewhat amusing. And just like the Dryad, it can also cast Entangle at will, except with a vastly higher area of effect, but you have to target an enemy first. And it has double synergy with Entangled areas too, because of its regeneration ability. Whenever it starts its turn on an entangled surface, you'll be healed for 10 hit points. Quite good. After all, both the Dryad and her Treant summon can entangle the enemies, right? And speaking about Entangled, I actually forgot to cover this. The Dryad's melee attacks themselves also get to entangle the enemy on hit. The Treant's melee damage isn't quite as good as the Dryad's. Unfortunately, it's more for tanking, but it does have complete piercing and bludgeoning resistance. That is, no matter if the weapon is enchanted or not, it will take half damage from physical strikes of these types. Now be careful, because both the Dryad and the Treant, as you might expect, will take extra fire damage. Which also means you should be quite wary of casting Entangle close to fire surfaces, including burning objects and candles and so on, because it will immediately turn the entangled surface into fire. Now do note that both the Dryad and the Treant summons have one kinda annoying limitation. They lack the jump ability, unlike all the other summons you see here, which means they are at a higher risk of being blocked by other summon allies, or lag behind the rest of your party. Jumping is that useful. Hopefully it's just an oversight, and I suppose they might implement it to them later. Doesn't make much sense that a Dryad, for example, wouldn't be able to jump, I suppose. And by the way, the Dryad's Treant summon will recharge on a short rest. So if your Treant dies, just summon it back again after a short rest. You don't have to resummon the Dryad for that. Level 5 spells is another huge upgrade for summoners, because it's when you get the Conjure Elemental spell. And the normal elementals are all amazing. Each has a different set of abilities depending on the element you choose. But I'll be blunt, like always, fire is, to me, the best pick. First, all the elements have a warp ability. That's right, they get you teleport at will, as a bonus action once per round. Teleportation is even better than flight, right? Because even if you are surrounded by enemies, if you teleport, you won't get hit by attacks of opportunity, just like the Misty Step spell, also amazing. They have great hit points too, with the Earth Elemental being the tankiest of them all, both when it comes to AC and hit points. Now, the main reason for choosing fire over the rest is because it has the highest potential damage. Through its multi-attack ability, if the enemy is burning, they'll take double damage from this, which by default is already a very high amount. Now the best thing is the element, through its normal attack called Smoldering Touch, will automatically apply burning to enemies they hit, which makes for a very powerful combo when you have multiple fire elementals. One goes for a normal Smoldering Touch attack to make enemies burn, meanwhile the others can now use their multi-attack for double damage to easily dispatch anything. Last but not least, the fire elementals also have the Erupting Cinder ability, which is like a minor fireball they can also cast at will. And since they are immune to fire themselves, just like the Imps, you can also blow them up with your own fireballs, together with enemies. And don't forget, this will leave the enemies burning too, for proper combos with multi-attack. Now level 6 is when we have the ultimate spells of the game, as you might have expected. First, through the upgrade to the Conjure Elemental spell we just covered. When you cast it as a level 6 spell, you can go for an Elemental Myrmidon instead. And the best one is the opposite of fire now. The Water Myrmidon. As you might have expected, the Water Myrmidons have way better stats than the normal elementals. Much higher AC, together with higher hit points too. Even higher than your own characters. They can both fly and teleport at will, but the water one has two very unique and powerful abilities. First, through healing vapors, it can heal all of your party members because the area of effect is huge per turn, although it only works during combat. It only won't heal the caster themselves, that is the elemental, but can heal friendly elementals. While this will heal enemies too, it can be used to your advantage because it will make everyone wet, which means further damage from cold attacks, which the elemental themselves specializes in. It has a very powerful melee strike ability called Hymal Strike, with 2 instances of cold damage. The best part is it will chill enemies for 2 turns, together with the damage. But unlike the Fire Elemental's burning ability, this one has a saving throw. Chilled targets are vulnerable to cold damage, which of course is amazing because they'll take even higher damage from further Hymal strikes. But the truly best part comes from its area of effect ability, Explosive Icicle. At first glance it might not seem like much, oh it's just 3d8 cold damage, but here's how it actually works. You fire 3 instances of Explosive Icicle per use, and it does hit enemies on an area of effect to boot. So it's actually 3d8 damage times 3 on an area of effect, each of the icicles hitting all of the enemies inside. Unlike, let's say, a fireball, it does require an attack roll, but this is actually better because it means it can critical hit for even higher damage. And as I'll soon explain, you have so many ways of debuffing the enemies and granting advantage to your attacks that you can get very nice criticals with this. Because you can use this per turn, trust me, when you have 3 or 4 Water Myrmidons spamming, they'll be frozen like popsicles and die very fast. It's the ultimate summon ability in the game we have so far, without a doubt. It's really OP. Once again, it's per turn, unlike all of your sad character abilities which are per short rest or long rest. The elementals are just on a whole other level. Lastly, this even automatically creates ice surfaces beneath the targets, which means it will automatically force them to roll a saving throw or also be knocked down, so it's quite busted. So to put it simply, your Water Myrmidons have the best of both worlds. Healing as area of effect, and also amazing single target and area of effects damage. Just be careful because they are not immune to cold damage themselves, which means if you blast them with explosive icicles, you'll take damage, the same for your party members. And don't forget, if you chill the enemies first with Hymal Strike, they'll also take double damage from explosive icicle. Now, amusingly enough, despite lacking summons in other spell levels, at least when compared to wizards, sorcerers, and druids, clerics do have a unique and very powerful level 6 summoning spell, Planar Ally. When you cast this, you can choose between Cambion, Deva, or the Genie. Honestly, the Genie to me is the best. First, it has super high armor class, amazing hit points, is actually the sum of the highest hit points in the game, I have close to 200 here. Great stats overall too, can also teleport through shifting winds and fly just like the greater elementals. His 2 hits chance is great, together with normal melee damage 9 to 32, although it's poison and some enemies are resistant to it. The best part is it has multiple very powerful infinite use abilities, my favorite one being Sweet Plum Gales. First, it has no friendly fire, so only works on enemies, right? And the effect is quite good. Enemies that fail their strength saving throw will become restrained, which is just like the muddy debuff I've covered for the Mephits, except restraint also locks them into place so they cannot move. This will keep applying the effect for every round the enemy is stuck inside the Gale too. There's a bug with this, however, in that currently, even though the genie is the caster, it actually counts as if the cleric who summoned them was the caster of Swift Plum Gales itself, which explains why my Shadow Heart here has it as a concentration effect instead of the genie. They also have Thunder Wave at will, which is the same as the spell, although I don't find it as good as the Gale. And even a Drunken Inhale ability, which is quite amusing because as a cone, can make enemies drunk, together with dealing poison damage. But honestly, the Gale is definitely the best pick here, for the amazing debuff it is. For our last summon we have yet another Undead, this time from the Create Undead spell, which will conjure a mummy, unlike the ghouls, skeletons, and zombies from the lesser version. The problem with the mummy, well, it's not that she's bad, it's that she has to compete with both Planar Ally in the case of clerics, or the greater elemental Myrmidons for other casters, which are, to put it simply, way better than the mummy, I'm afraid. She has a special ability to fear one enemy, but it eats your entire action for the turn, and then her special multi-attack can hit for a lot of damage if the enemy is feared, which is kinda too situational as opposed to, let's say, the Genie or the Water Myrmidon. Because your characters will end the game with but a single level 6 spell slot, I don't really find much of an use for the mummy. Especially because, even if you are a Necromancer wizard, you only get extra and more powerful summons if they come from Animate Dead. The mummy doesn't, she comes from Create Undead after all. So honestly, just invest in the Greater Elemental or Planar Ally instead. Alright, now that we know what the best summons are, let's get into ways to further empower your summons. As you play through the game, especially on Tactician, especially early on, you might find that your summons like the zombies and the skeletons, the imps, they don't have the best to hit chances, especially on Tactician mode where enemies have higher AC. There are ways to overcome that, however. So when it comes to increasing your summon power, first, you have the Fairy Fire unique druid spell. If the enemies fail a dexterity saving throw, they will not only turn visible, but all attack rolls of all party members, including summons, will now have advantage, which of course highly increases the chances of you hitting them. While it might be druid exclusive, remember that druid is already one of the best summoners too, as I'll soon explain. Second, Fog Cloud. Fog Cloud will automatically blind enemies inside it. So unlike Fairy Fire, it does not require a saving throw at all, and druids just happen to have both. Blinded enemies will also be easier to hit, just like Fairy Fire. Your summons now have advantage on their attacks. Just remember that because this will obscure enemies, some summons like the skeletons for example, they have dark vision, right? So you have to move them a bit closer to the enemy to attack them at range inside the fog as to not get a nasty penalty. And of course you don't want to blind your own characters by going inside the fog, it's mostly for ranged allies and summons. Crowd control spells also do wonders, but the best one is Slow. At least for a summoner playstyle, because Slow will reduce the enemy's armor class by a massive 2, together with dexterity saving throws, which highly increases the chances of Fairy Fire hitting as I've just covered. Slow is also a Wisdom saving throw, which is very easy to hit even on Tactician mode. Right, my Gale for example has around 80 to 100% chance of targeting enemies even late game on Tactician mode with Slow. Its multi-target lasts very long, and don't forget, because it doesn't really give advantage or disadvantage, rather it reduces the enemy's armor class, you can combine it with a source of advantage, such as Fairy Fire or Blind from Fog Cloud and your Raven on hit blind effect. You also have a unique Greater Mind Flayer power called Fracture Psyche, which will reduce the enemy's armor class by 1 based on an intelligence saving throw, which is very easy to hit. Enemies tend to dump their intelligence, unless they are wizards. You might say, oh, it's just one, but well, Baldur's Gate 3 is a low numbers game. When you combine this one with slow, it's already a -3, and then you have advantage from blind and so on. It all stacks up quite nicely to ensure even your low attack roll summons like the skeletons can achieve 75 to 90% plus chances of targeting enemies even late game on Tactician. Speaking about Mind Flayer powers, the normal Perilous Stake ability is also amazing for a summoner playstyle. It will automatically make one enemy become vulnerable to all damage, which means twice as much damage taken from everything, including everything your summons do. It's really amazing, despite being limited by once per long rest. Ideally you wanna save it for bosses or tough enemies, of course. Sure, the enemies will also heal when they attack you, but okay, good luck attacking when you first have to survive 30 plus summon attacks, right? Before your turn finally comes. Now, when it comes to summon survivability, there's two spells that really stand out, both accessible to Cleric. First, the level 2 spell Aid. It will grant an increase to the maximum hit points of all allies, summons included, 5 per level starting from level 2. So if you cast it as a level 3 spell, it's plus 10 and so on. It doesn't require concentration, which is part of what makes it so good. And you can combine it with temporary hit point sources too, although for summons that's not gonna happen. This can really help summons because a lot of them, especially the earlier ones, have low hit points. I mean, the familiars have only 1, right? Yet my friendly dog now has 37. Lastly, and this one is a much higher level spell, but quite amazing too, Hero's Feast, available to both clerics and druids. It will also grant everyone an increase to their maximum hit points, and will stack with Aid. In this case, it's plus 12. There's other nice bonuses too, such as immunity to poison, disease, and frightened. And advantage on wisdom saving throws. It's quite stacked and definitely worth the level 6 spell mark. Don't forget, both Hero's Feast and Aid will last pretty much forever until your next long rest. When you combine both, your summons can really get a lot of hit points, even low level ones. Alright, now let us cover the best classes and also party for the Summoner playstyle, together with Necromancy. While it is true that very early game we don't have that many summons, as I covered before, it's mostly the Raven Familiar, the Spiritual Weapon from Cleric, and also the Imp from Warlock. Starting from level 5 you get the Lesser Undead, but honestly it's only from level 6 onwards that you really get a lot of summon power going. Because the classes that enhance summons, well, they only get the special abilities at that point. First, Circle of the Spores Druid, which to me is the best summoner in the game. It has all of the best summon spells, including the unique Conjure Dryad, as I said before, together with its Fungal Zombies too, which by the way you gain starting from level 6 and can be used as a reaction, which means you can also cast them during battle from enemy corpses that have been recently slain. The second best one would be
ready and willing.
The Necromancer Wizard archetype, because of both the additional Undead ability gained at level 6, together with better summons. This will increase the damage of your Undead equal to your proficiency bonus, while also granting you an extra Undead per cast, and bonuses to their hit points equal to your Wizard level. All of this is gained at level 6. The other Necromancer abilities are rather subpar, I'm afraid, unlike the Spore Druid, which has amazing ones even as early as level 1. And I'll soon release a guide for both classes, right? For this one I just want to cover the summons in depth. Now the Warlock class also has a niche, at least when it comes to very early game, because of the Imp summons. But starting from level 6 plus, it gets kinda outclassed by the Mushroom Druid and also the Necromancer Wizard. Now, as far as the best party for a summoner run, well, it depends on what you want. First, if you want as many summons as possible, then you'll want everyone to be a druid, right? Because there's no comparison. However, that will leave you lacking in a few other areas that can help you improve the power of your summons. What I would do is go with 2 Circle of the Mushroom Druids, both our main character and Astarion here respect as one. This way you'll have an amazing number of summons on 2 characters, together with very powerful class abilities too. After that, a Necromancer Wizard, we have Gale here, not just for the stronger and more numerous undead powers, but also the very useful wizard spells that clerics and druids lack. Most importantly, powerful crowd control such as Slow, which is paramount to increase summons to hit chances, Counter Spell, because the main weakness of a summoner playstyle is, well, your summons will usually be clustered together. If the enemies get a powerful area of effect going like a fireball or ice storm, it's gonna hit a lot of your summons at once, right? With Counter Spell, you can avoid that most of the time. Hypnotic Pattern is also amazing as crowd control, and well, Wizard gets the best summons outside of the Dryad and the Treant. Last but not least, we have Cleric. For me, it's Shadowheart as a War Priest. Clerics have very nice spells that other classes cannot get to, mostly the Aid buff for even more durable summons. Silence can be good too, once again to prevent area of effects from damaging and killing your summons. The unique Planar Ally, which while late is very powerful and very fun, but they do have one downside. They lack both the minor and the normal elemental summon spells, together with the Dryad, of course. And why go with War Priest? Well, first you get double the attacks as most other clerics by spending a War Priest extra attack charge, but there's also another very useful ability called Guided Strike. With this, as a reaction, you can increase the attack roll of any ally, including summon creatures, by a massive +10, which will most likely ensure it hits. When you combine this, for example, with the Raven Familiar, you'll highly increase the chances of blinding even powerful enemies like bosses. And as I said before, a blinded or muddied or restrained enemy is a dead enemy because all of your summons will then gang up on it. There are of course more powerful benefits for a War Priest, which I'll cover in my War Priest and Cleric guide coming soon. So to me, if you want a balanced party that covers all grounds for a summoner, go with 2 Mushroom Druids, 1 Necromancer Wizard and 1 War Priest Cleric. Well friends, so this was it for my Summoner and Necromancer guide. I hope I've managed to explain everything to you as to why summons are so good in Baldur's Gate 3. If you found this guide useful, as always, please remember to like, subscribe, and even consider becoming a channel member if you can. I truly appreciate your support. Thank you for watching and see you next time, friends.